All right, my friends, let's talk about when your situation feels unique or different because you have to see this person every day. So, this is to me the difference between breakups like long ago and breakups now. Well, I say that, but that's really just like the social media component of like being able to see where your ex is and what your ex is doing on an oddly confusing basis. Um, but still, I guess back in the day, you probably went through breakups with coworkers and um, you still had to co-parent. You still had mutual friend groups. But for some reason, to me, this feels like the iPhone era of heartbreaks. And I, my biggest thing with this is we don't have to make it a problem. And there's no exact right or wrong decision around this. When you are in a scenario where you have the option to choose, like, do I continue to do the activity that I love, knowing I'm going to see my ex, or do I just avoid it altogether to let myself heal? And I think more often than not, people opt in for the second, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you have the ability to avoid your ex at all costs, block, delete, all the things, that can be helpful to the right person. To some people, the restriction creates even more wanting and craving and desiring. Because when we tell ourselves we can't have something, we tend to want it more. For example, if we're telling ourselves we can't have the cookie, all of a sudden, all we can think about is the cookie and thinking about the cookie. And it just becomes like a weird loop in our brain. So I always say, always give yourself permission to have contact, give yourself permission to go, give yourself permission to be in the same friend groups. Just to loosen the restriction. It doesn't mean that you will. Like, again, with the food example of like, just because we can have the cookie doesn't necessarily mean we will eat the whole package of cookies. Now, when we've been telling ourselves we can't have the cookie and then we eat one and have the whole package, is because of the restriction in the first place. So, more often than not, when we give ourselves permission to have the cookie, we're less likely to eat the whole package of cookies because we're allowed to have cookies. There's an abundance of cookies. So, same thing with your ex here of like, I am more often than not going to tell a client, hey, we can talk to your ex. We could call them up right now. We could write them an email. We could reach out to them on Instagram. We could go to a mutual friends gathering and see your ex. We could go to that activity and see your ex there. We can do all of those things. And then the question becomes, do we want to? Do I want to have contact with my ex? Do I want to spend time in those mutual friend groups? Do I want to do those things? And sometimes the answer is yes. More often than not, I find the answer is no. And then that's where the real work begins. Why am I spending time with this like friend group? Why am I doing these things? Sometimes the activity is something that you genuinely do want to do. And then we get to say, hey, we get to reclaim our power. How do I learn indifference? How do I learn all of that, which, by the way, is reducing desire and attachment. I'll say it again and again. When we have no desire for and we have no attachment to your ex, you are not triggered by seeing the person. You're not triggered. You don't have this emotional charge when you hear their name, things like that. So when you have the option, you can always give yourself the overall permission slip of, hey, I can have contact. I can hang out with mutual friends. I can go to this activity. I can do all these things. Do I want to? And get clear about that answer and why, right? Then, now, if you are in a scenario where you can't avoid your ex, I work with plenty of people in this setting, right? There is, wow, I hate loud trucks. I'm sorry if you guys drive loud trucks. I literally loathe them. I grew up in this tiny little town and they all had loud trucks and I was like, this is so obnoxious. What's wrong with you? It's absolutely insane. Drives me bananas. Okay. So if you are someone who does not have the ability to be completely out of sight, out of mind, you have to co-parent, you have to co-work. I help plenty of people in both of those scenarios. The goal in my mind, when you are in that scenario, is zero desire and zero attachment, because when you have no desire to be with them and zero attachment to them creating the future that you want in your life, it is crazy the results that I see in my world. Okay. I just had my girl, Lauren, reach out to me, and she was like, Dor, my ex-husband came over. He needed to grab some things and we needed to plan a specific event for our kid. And he was there for 2 hours. We were discussing the whole time. And the entire time, I felt grateful that we were friends. I felt like we were friends just catching up. I was so grateful that I didn't want to be with him and that I didn't want to be married to him. And I was so glad I wasn't married to him and that he wasn't my partner. But I love co-parenting with him. And I'm like, dang, that is it right there, right? That is what we're going for. That is true indifference. She doesn't have to brace herself. She's not crying. She's not freaking out. She's not have emotional reactions. She's just calm. She loves her life so much, and she's so giddy about the world that she's in that she's like, yeah, this is the guy I co-parent with. I mean, come the fuck on, my friends. That's what we're going for. Same thing with, if you work with an ex. You could leave the job technically. Most of the people who come to me and want to work with me are not wanting to leave the job, hence why it's a problem and why they need my help. And what I find in those scenarios is that, again, we can create indifference, and not like the bad or negative kind of indifference, like an indifference of just remaining calm and content with what is. And I remember my girl Felicia. I love her and her puppy Percy. So cute. And she was having like breakup anxiety, panic attacks because she'd have to go to work and see her ex. And she was constantly like avoiding, what building was he going to come from? What route do I take to the next office, right? It's micromanaging your life to avoid triggers versus she reduced desire and attachment completely, no longer had the trigger because she no longer desired him. She was no longer afraid of him. She was no longer attached to him. She was just like, yeah, I'm living my life. And that's another dude at my office that I don't actually really like that much, but I'm not like worried about running into him. And she just stopped the panic attacks entirely, which is just so cool to me. So I want you to know that if you're in a situation where maybe you have to or seemingly have to remain in some form of contact, or, you can't do out of sight, out of mind situation, that getting over your ex is still available to you. And honestly, I think it's a level of getting over your ex work that will amplify your breakup journey. Because if you learn how to do that, if you learn how to reduce desire and attachment to your ex in this way and create like a calm indifference, think about how many other things you're going to learn how to do that in your life for. I was so grateful I had that skill set for my miscarriage, to be quite honest. I just remember avoiding like baby showers, avoiding my Instagram to see like the next pregnancy announcement. I was constantly avoiding those things that were quote unquote triggering me until I reduced desire and attachment for wanting kids. And I was like, oh, I'm free. I don't even want that. I don't even like that. I don't even want that anymore. And then I ironically got pregnant like a couple months later, which was interesting. And we talk about this all the time when we talk about getting back together with your ex. You can always increase your desire for your ex again if you need to, but I had to increase my desire for children and rewrite that story around that, which is a completely different episode. But getting over your ex is still available to you, even if you have to co-parent, co-work, have mutual friend groups. And if you want to keep those friend groups, if you want to stay in your job, if you want to successfully co-parent, you can get to indifference and neutrality and feel so good in that experience. It is available. So come join us in the Get Over Your Ex program. You can join us at DorothyABJohnson /Get Over My Ex, and I will see you inside.